Murder Drones. It is an amazing and yet also criminally underrated series that proves to be quite a confusing story to most people. Originally releasing nearly 3 years ago, as of the date of this video, it has been a long and exciting ride for the series. And with one final episode of the show having been released, Murder Drones has solidified itself as one of the best indie animated shows ever created. Hello everyone, Spade here. Today I will be diving into and exploring the entire story of Murder Drones, as well as explaining why this silly looking show about murderous robots is the best indie animated show to be produced to this day. In my humble opinion, of course. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video as I give you my retrospective on Murder Drones. The story of Murder Drones begins on the planet Earth sometime in the far future, with a mega corporation named J.C. Jensen. This corporation was known for its interstellar business model, and its creation of robots named worker drones. These worker drones were created with a sole purpose: to serve humanity, having no rights and being delegated to different types of work that their masters wanted done. This work ranged from domestic work to large-scale manual labor in construction and other fields. They served humanity as slaves, and did their jobs pretty well. But the humans, after a while of keeping them, usually decided to discard the drone and replace them with a new version. These discarded drones were sent and dumped in landfills, being destroyed and left to rot as scrapped parts. The drones made by J.C. Jensen also had something else to them. See, when a drone was discarded, there was a specific set of instructions that needed to be followed in order to properly get rid of the drone's corpse. And naturally, with these instructions being set in stone, nearly no one took any of these procedures seriously, with most drones being discarded improperly. After a while of this mass improper riddance of drones, it came back to bite humanity, and it bit very hard. This all started with the discarding of a drone named Cyn. Cyn was a normal worker drone who had served her purpose and was subsequently disassembled improperly by her owners, like many of the other drones. Once she was incorrectly disassembled and thrown in the landfill, her AI had been damaged so badly that it stayed active, even though Cyn herself was long gone. She was able to make it out of the landfill with the help of a young girl named Tessa James Elliott, who had a hobby for collecting damaged drones and repairing them. Once Cyn made it out, her AI adapted into a very rare mutation, named the Absolute Solver. This mutation effectively resurrected Cyn and also gave her strong powers. These powers allowed Cyn to influence and assimilate the environment around her however she wanted to. Cyn, being reborn and remembering the cruelty that humanity imposed upon her, had many plans to eliminate the entirety of civilization. While Tessa was unaware of what Cyn really was, she took the faulty drone back to the Elliott Manor, where she fixed up Cyn and let her roam the mansion. Cyn quickly got to work and spread the Absolute Solver like an infection throughout the Elliott's Manor, infecting all of the family's drones. Among these now infected drones were N, V, and J, who later become some of the most important characters in the story, and were back then, in Tessa's Manor, her favorite drones. While Cyn corrupted the drones, she gave herself full access to their systems. She wiped their memories and added them to her collection of corrupted drones. And of course, while this all happened, Cyn made sure to keep a low profile to not alert any of the humans and drones that were still not corrupted. Cyn managed to stay right under the Elliott's noses for a while until the time to strike was perfect and all of the drones had been infected. This opportunity finally presented itself to Cyn one fateful night when the Elliott family hosted a gala at their mansion with many guests. The Absolute Solver was finally revealed, with the drone's infection in full swing, as well as Cyn revealing her own powers too. The entire gala was destroyed and every single guest died, with no survivors left standing. Once the scene was finally discovered by J.C. Jensen, it was already too late for everyone in the gala and all life on Earth. While Cyn was still living in the Elliott's Manor, she had made the basement into her own lab, creating her very own creations out of existing worker drones. These new horrific and terrifying drones were called Disassembly drones. They stood very tall with sharp metallic claws, high-intensity lasers, and swords built into their arms. They had massive metallic wings that allowed them to fly at high speeds, a tail filled with liquid nanite that when injected into anything would dissolve it, and a virtually indestructible body. These disassembly drones were made to be killing machines, and they did their jobs very well, with the first worker drones converted being N, V, and J, who had now become Cyn's favorites. With no one left to stop her, and having made these new killing machines, Cyn finally revealed the true power of the Solver to the entire population of Earth by invading the planet and killing off nearly every human living on it. Even the military of the world was unable to stop Cyn, with the disassembly drones being able to destroy nearly everything, and Cyn using the powers of the Solver herself to pick apart the planet. Finally, Cyn revealed her strongest power, which was known only as Null. This power was able to create a controlled black hole that Cyn used to completely implode Earth, killing every last human and collapsing the entire planet for good. The Absolute Solver and the murder drones were all that was left, and Cyn was not planning on stopping with Earth. She wanted her vengeance to be taken out on every planet that had human life. Following the complete destruction of Earth, Cyn had now set her sights on the other human-colonized planets throughout the galaxy, and planned to do the exact same to them as what she did on her home planet. The Absolute Solver spread from planet to planet very quickly, destroying most human life in the galaxy, as humanity, despite how advanced they were, had no real way to fight back against Cyn and the Solver. Though many of the star systems and their habitable planets had been wiped out by Cyn, there was still one system and planet that remained, where the humans fled to figure out a way to stop the Solver. Copper 9. It was a once habitable world populated by humanity, but there was one distinct difference about it from every other planet in the series. See, in Copper 9, humanity had built a massive facility inside of the planet that was able to keep a number of people safe inside of it to work on a cure for the Solver. This facility was known as the Cabin Fever Labs, and it was effectively an underground fortress that was protected by drones called Sentinels. These Sentinels were mechanical velociraptors that were designed to be highly combat effective against disassembly drones, and were programmed to only kill things that had a CPU. The Sentinels were scattered all throughout the upper levels of the labs, where the humans weren't even working, just to guard any possible entrances to the lower levels. The Sentinels were insanely effective at their job, with Cyn's murder drones being unable to make it through the labs because of them. And in addition to the Sentinels, you needed a special key bug to even enter the lower levels of the lab. Basically, the Cabin Fever Labs were the most secure place in the galaxy. The humans who hoped to study and find a cure to the Absolute Solver experimented on hundreds of worker drones down in the lower levels, attempting to purposely infect them with the Solver to find a cure for it. Only 2 of the hundreds of drones survived the infection of the Absolute Solver, and the humans eventually found a cure for the virus, simply known as the patch. Shaped like a crucifix, the patch was a USB drive that, when administered to an infected drone, would be able to block any of Cyn's influence while allowing the drone to maintain the powers of the Solver. In short, it was a drive that turned the infected drone from evil to good. The 2 drones that successfully received the patch were named Nori and Yeva. The first of the 2, and the one who was much more cooperative, was Yeva, who, even after getting the patch administered and suffering the abuse of being a worker drone, decided to side with the humans to stop the Solver. On the other hand, there was Nori. Cyn, after figuring out what the humans were doing in the labs, took control of Nori while she was still infected, and broke free of her containment. Now completely possessed, Nori killed many of the scientists in the labs, until eventually Yeva stepped in with her Absolute Solver powers and administered the patch to Nori. Experiments in the lab ended up succeeding, and the patch worked as a cure for the Solver, except for one slight problem. Once Cyn realized that the patch was working, she used the last of her minor control over Nori to create another black hole, like the one on Earth, but not as strong. This singularity did not destroy the entire planet like it did on Earth, but it did collapse the planet's core, which led to a permanent nuclear winter on Copper 9, as well as making every single last biological organism go extinct. With the extinction of all humans on the planet, the worker drones that inhabited Copper 9 were now free to roam and do as they pleased. Many of the drones made friends, lived their lives freely, and started families, even creating brand new neural networks that developed over time, and were basically considered the children of the drones. Things were looking up for the worker drones, and life seemed to be good. Until... See, now that Cyn's influence had been blocked out from Copper 9, as she had no host left to possess on the planet, and knowing that there was a cure out there that could potentially stop her, Cyn planned to destroy Copper-9 just like the other planets as soon as possible. Feeling rushed, Cyn dropped her original plan of slowly infecting the planet and sent the murder drones to invade the planet right away. Once the drones made landfall on Copper-9, they immediately started to kill as many things as possible, no matter what they were. It was what they were programmed to do, after all. The murder drones that arrived on Copper-9 also included the trio of N, V, and J, who used to be Tessa's and were now Cyn's favorite drones. As the murder drones killed as many of the worker drones on Copper-9 as possible, they thought that the instructions they were following came from J.C. Jensen and not Cyn, so they were under the impression that the workers were rogue AI that posed a threat to humanity, while in reality, they were helping Cyn's malicious plans. None of the drones on Copper-9 knew what the Absolute Solver was, due to Cyn's manipulation of their memories, and while the murder drones thought they were following J.C. Jensen's orders, the workers thought that the humans were their biggest enemy, while in reality, they had basically gone extinct. The murder drones were very successful in their mission, forcing the remaining workers to go into hiding, and the only thing that was missing in their mission was to get through the cabin fever labs. This still wasn't possible even for these highly advanced drones, as the Sentinels proved to be too powerful to take on even for them. No one was able to put up a real fight against the Solver. Nori and Yeva had been taken out by the murder drones, the workers had no way of fighting back, and there was so much miscommunication that the Absolute Solver was not even able to be found out. It all seemed quite hopeless, and Cyn was going to completely destroy Copper-9. There was nothing anyone could do about it. Or was there? Finally, we have gone over the full backstory of the series, and now move on to the actual storyline of the show. This part of the story takes place a while after the murder drones invaded Copper-9. The remaining worker drones built a community together, hidden behind massive doors that managed to protect them from the destruction of the murder drones. Before Nori was killed, she managed to have a child named Uzi, who had survived Cyn's onslaught as well as inheriting Nori's solver powers, and grew from just an untrained neural network into a fully fledged teenage worker drone. Uzi had a very edgy personality in the series. In the first episode, we are introduced to her rebellious character, as she tries to get through life while being very different from her peers. She doesn't like the society that she lives in, and thinks that they should be outside of the doors, fighting the murder drones, but mostly everyone thinks of her as crazy. Uzi eventually builds up the courage to go outside of the doors, and with her newly made railgun, she fights a murder drone. This ends up with her being chased back to her home, and the murder drone N getting inside of her complex. After an intense sequence, Uzi ends up being left to die by her dad, who didn't have the courage to save her, and N ends up feeling so bad for her that he spares her and teams up with her after a betrayal from his colleague Jay. Now teamed up, Uzi and N end up killing Jay and capturing V, then flying off from the workers' compound. In episode 2, Jay's death ends up as a major problem for everyone. See, in every single drone's body that is infected by the Absolute Solver, both worker and disassembly, lies a little biomechanical heart that is controlled by the Solver, and takes over the drone's body in case the host dies. When Jay died, her heart took over and killed many workers throughout the episode, collecting parts and rebuilding herself, a new, more horrific body. Uzi and N eventually come back to the compound, and after a hard fight against Jay's new eldritch form, they end up killing her, and figuring out what the Absolute Solver was. This discovery made them realize that J.C. Jensen and humanity was not their real enemy, and a much bigger threat was looming. In episode 3, it is also discovered that Yeva's daughter Doll had survived, and not only that, but she had gained the powers of the Absolute Solver from her mother, just like Uzi. Doll attempts to kill V, who escaped her confinement and almost ends up succeeding, but N and Uzi step in and stop Doll's plan alongside V. In the end of the episode, Doll comes back to life and tries to kill Uzi, but Uzi ends up using and finding out about her Absolute Solver powers, stopping Doll's attempt. Doll goes from wanting to kill Uzi to feeling bad for her, and proclaims that if she finds a cure for her mutation, then she will share it with Uzi too. V had also been the drone who killed Yeva, so Doll refused to work with Uzi as she had teamed up alongside the murder drones. Going into episode 4, both of them wanted to find out what was happening to them, and how to fix it, but because of this collaboration, they were not able to work together. In episode 4, Uzi explores a few cabins in the woods, while her fellow workers, as well as V and N, go on a class trip through the same woods. She finds evidence in the cabins of her mother's predictions of the murder drones coming, as well as Jay's eldritch form, and an event known as the Singularity Event. While going through the cabins, Uzi discovers the key bug that acts as a guide for entry into the cabin fever labs. As the episode goes on, Uzi falls deeper into the Solver's control and ends up going rogue, killing multiple of her classmates. She only goes back to her usual self once N intervenes and comforts her. The consequences of the Solver's influence are severe, as Uzi transforms into a demonic entity with gargoyle-type wings and a tail of her own. She gains a bunch of new abilities in the episode, but also starts to overheat quickly in the sunlight, as the murder drones do. In episode 5, Uzi learns that N and V's memories were deleted by Cyn. In an effort to figure out what the Absolute Solver was, Uzi hacks into their memories, replacing Cyn as the drone's administrator, and restoring the memories that she needed. Now with N and V fully free from Cyn's control, and a basic idea of what needed to be done to stop the Solver, they made their way over to the Cabin Fever labs. However, the group, once arriving at the location, realized that they were not the only ones who wanted to get into the labs. See, back in episode 3, a grown-up Tessa, who apparently survived the Gala massacre on Earth, arrived on Copper 9, with another copy of Jay. In episode 5 and 6, it is revealed that Tessa had made a deal with Dahl to take her into the Cabin Fever labs, if Dahl brought the key bug to Tessa, as both parties were after the patch. In episode 5, Dahl ends up meeting Uzi again, and forcefully takes the key bug from her. At the start of episode 6, when everyone meets up, Dahl immediately runs away with the key bug, as she knows that Tessa would want to team up alongside Uzi and the murder drones. As Dahl entered the upper levels of the labs to try and find the patch, the main group followed, with Jay being left behind to guard Tessa's ship, and the other 4 dropping down into the upper levels. On a race against Dahl to be the first to enter the lower levels of the labs, the group fought their way through hordes of sentinels patrolling the upper levels, and a few funky drones that captured and tried to extract Uzi's heart to put into an oven. As the episode went on, Cyn's influence on Uzi became increasingly prevalent, with Cyn seeing the opportunity to possess a new host. Eventually, the group is freed from their capture, and managed to make it to an elevator that leads down into the lower levels. At the climax of the episode, Uzi gets nearly fully possessed by the Solver, alongside a surprise attack from Dahl that ended in V's death by the Sentinels, and the final trio of Tessa, N, and Uzi making it down into the lower levels of the labs. Finally reaching the bottom layers of the labs, a conflict occurs between Uzi and the other 2. Back in episode 6 in the upper levels of the labs, when Tessa and N had been alone together, Tessa showed N the destruction that the Absolute Solver had caused to Earth, and basically tried to probe N into helping her kill Uzi. Once Uzi found out about this, after they landed in the lower levels, she panicked and ran off, as well as sealing off the path she was going to with her Absolute Solver powers, as well as leaving N and Tessa to split off too. Calming herself down, Uzi made her way through the labs, finally finding out about the experiments with Nori and the Solver, as well as discovering the truth behind it and herself. Meanwhile, N finds out that Tessa had been lying about the patch in the Solver the entire time, as well as discovering that Nori had been down inside of the labs alive the entire time, but her body was gone. The only part of her left was her heart. Together, N and Nori made their way through the labs, getting past the monstrosities that Cyn was making to try and stop them. Tessa went over to the computer in the labs to find which drones were still infected and posed a threat to her. In the process, she ran into Dahl, who was eventually killed by Cyn. Uzi ends up in a fight with Tessa, but it is stopped when N arrives and decapitates Tessa, after finding out about her lies. N then hugs Uzi, and thinks that the journey is finally over. But sadly, Uzi had already been fully possessed by Cyn at this point, and used the moment of vulnerability to destroy the patch, as well as start a fight with N and Nori. In the final showdown of the episode, Uzi ends up being able to regain control of her body and exchanges a sweet moment with N. While N and Uzi finally hug it out, we see that Tessa somehow stayed alive even after getting her head cut off. It is finally revealed that this whole time Tessa had been Cyn, who was wearing her dead body as a flesh suit and secretly manipulating the group into getting her way. Cyn takes off her spacesuit and reveals her true form to N and Uzi, and proceeds to pull the both of them into the giant gaping flesh pit in the middle of the lab that was formed long ago when the experiments first began. Uzi sacrifices herself for N, throwing him out of the flesh pit and falling inside of it herself. which leads to the singularity event that Nori predicted so long ago. With Uzi floating in space and the solver finally being able to carry out its ultimate plan, all hope seems fully lost. As the singularity event comes to fruition, Copper 9 begins to fall apart and crack, with a massive singularity forming in the middle of the planet. Uzi floats in space, managing to survive and stick onto an object, and most of the surviving characters float in space or stick onto any of the floating objects that they can find. While floating in space, Uzi meets her mother Nori, and she explains that the only way to defeat Cyn would be to destroy her actual heart. The plan is set in motion, and Uzi is about to make her way towards Earth, but is interrupted when N speeds past on a spaceship, grabbing Uzi and making their way over to the planet's atmosphere. The two finally admit their romantic feelings for each other, and fall to the planet to fight Cyn. Reunited with V after she somehow survived the Sentinels, and now fighting against Jay and Cyn, the battle is intense, and has an immense emotional weight for the viewers as there are many surprises and moments of victory and fear throughout the sequence. In the end, Uzi grabs Cyn's heart out of her chest and tries to destroy it. Once the heart burns up and turns into a state of a black hole, Uzi thinks of only one thing, and consumes the remains of Cyn's heart fully. After learning how to resist the solver and consuming the core of it, Uzi basically creates a prison for Cyn and the solver, and the solver is unable to control her or leave in any way. The battle ends with Uzi taking full control over herself and everyone being saved. Cyn now lives eternally inside of Uzi, and seems more or less content with it. In the end, everyone got their happy ending, except for Doll and Jay, and the story ends on a relatively good note. Murder Drones. This series was a mess in the best way possible. Was it hard to understand? Yes. Were some things left unexplained in the end? Yes. Was it a perfect series? Absolutely not. But it was a damn good one, and possibly the best indie animated show ever produced. It has been a wild ride of plot twists, fights, emotions, and lots of anticipation, but this show has finally reached its end, and it was a quite fulfilling one too. Murder Drones isn't just a show about some silly robots fighting for reasons. It is a roller coaster of emotions and character development, and I bet a lot of other people have learned a thing or two from the series. Glitch did an excellent job on the series, especially considering their former budget and power in the industry, and I heavily commend them for that. All I have to say is this was an amazing show that was definitely worth the watch, and I will miss it very much. Anyways, thank you all for watching today's video. If you made it this far, you might as well leave a like and subscribe to my channel, if you want to see more content like this, of course. This is only my second video in this format, and I plan to create a lot more content in the future on many different topics. So be sure to leave a comment too, telling me what you thought, or if you have any different opinions about the show.